Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat Shalom.
I I have to say a brief word about you pioneers who got that message. And look, I'm sure there were some who got that message and said, "Oh gosh, this is the week. Then for sure, I know I don't want to come because it's indoors and it's gonna make me feel anxious." Makes perfect sense. But for those of you who were kind of waiting for that first opportunity to put on your mask and to come back here to the temple and to be inside this sanctuary for Friday night services for the first time in 19 months. First Friday night, I remember standing here on Friday night, March 6th, 2020. The sanctuary was chock full that night. It was a big religious school Shabbat. We had a big Shabbat dinner afterward, everybody helping themselves at a giant buffet. Who knew what the future was to hold? But hundreds of people here to celebrate, and this is the first time that we've welcomed Shabbat evening together inside this space since then, March 6th, 2020. That means for all of you who have come together to join us in person inside this room for the first time in such a long time, and for all of you who are joining us from your homes and are welcoming Shabbat and creating an extended community that transcends these walls. I want us together to give thanks for, quite literally, Shechianu is about being grateful for a special moment, but sometimes the words of Shechianu need to be spoken very literally so we understand exactly what it is we're saying. We praise you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who has given us the gift of life and sustained us in life during this crazy time of so much uncertainty, so much fear, and so much death. Thank you for sustaining us in life and enabling us to reach this moment together here in this space. The words can be found in the prayer book on page 344. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. Welcome home. Feels good. Shabbat is here. One of the great gifts of the reconstruction. A lot of you used to pray in this sanctuary with us back when it faced that way, back when the tradition of Liebig Temple was to direct our hearts toward Long Beach. We then changed the direction of the sanctuary and directed our hearts toward Jerusalem. I only make a joke because this is a very symmetrical space if you direct your heart toward Long Beach. And you know what? Sooner or later, the direction of your heart, it works its way around the globe and it makes it to Jerusalem. But this is the shorter direction to get there. And so we put the sanctuary bima over on this side, and we moved the pews such that you could be more around the space as opposed to, and people would ask all the time when we made the new sanctuary, so how much smaller is it? How much less seating is there in the sanctuary? And I'd always say we reused every single pew. It just feels smaller. It just feels more intimate. That was the goal. Take a very big room. This room seats as many as 400 people if you pack them in. It's a big room. But if you set it up this way, it feels like we are together in family. That was the goal. And so one of the other things we did when we changed the direction of the sanctuary is we carved these windows into the walls so that you could literally see Shabbat arriving, experience the beauty of the daytime and even the experience as the daylight fading both behind us and in front of us. And so we are ready for Kabbalat Shabbat to start walking that road that the mystics of our tradition, the Kabbalists and some of the other great rabbis and teachers sculpted for us with special words. One of those sets of words can be found on page 10. If you turn to page 10 in the prayer book, right in the middle of the page, you'll find these words drawing from the imagery of the mystical tradition, the Kabbalists, speaking of God as a soul friend, Yedid Nefesh, the friend of my soul. That's what this imagery is all about. And so I invite you to sing with us, or if it helps you, to begin to set aside all the other distractions, the intensity of a week now ended, if it helps you just to be able to close your eyes and to receive this music as a first step, a first toe in the water into Shabbat, that works for us as well. We're on page 10. Yedid nefesh Avarachama Avarachama Mishoch avdecha El ritzonecha El ritzonecha Yedid nefesh Avarachama Avarachama Mishoch avdecha El ritzonecha El ritzonecha Yarutz avdecha Kemo ayal Yishtachave El mulatarecha Yedid nefesh Avarachama Avarachaman Mishoch avdecha El ritzonecha El ritzonecha Yarutz avdecha Kemo ayal Yishtachave El mulatarecha Yedid nefesh Avarachama Avarachama Mishoch avdecha El ritzonecha El ritzonecha Let us welcome the Sabbath bride into this space, into our hearts, into our lives, with the words of L'Chadodi, found on pages 20 and 21. As usual, we're going to sing the first two verses, top of page 20, and then we'll sing the top and bottom verses on 21. So those are verses 1, 2, 5, and 9. We need your voices, your spirit to create the energy, the excitement, the anticipation that this cosmic wedding we are talking about when it takes place, we want to feel all of that with joy and with love and with you. Page 20. Lecha dodi likrat kala. Love it. Pnei Shabbat nekavera. Lecha dodi likrat kala. Pnei Shabbat nekavera. שמור וזכור בדיבור אחד, השמיענו אל המיוחד, אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם ותפארת ולתהילה לך דודי, לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה, לך דודי. לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי היא מקור הברכה, מראש מקדם נשוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה לך דודי. לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה, לך דודי. לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. Top of 21. התעוררי, התעוררי, כי באורך ומאורי, אורי אורי שיר דברי, גיבור עיני עלייך נגלה לך דודי. לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה, לך דודי. לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. If you're able, I invite you to stand and to face the entrance to the sanctuary right over there, so that we can use our mind's eye to see her and feel her presence. Boi v'shalom hateret ba'ala, בשמחה ובצולה, תוך אמוני המסגולה. בואי חלה, בואי חלה, לך דודי. לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה, לך דודי. לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה, לך דודי. לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה, לך דודי. לקראת כלה, פני שבת נקבלה. The Baruch Hu is on page 28. Yai lai lai, yai lai lai lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai lai, yai lai lai lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai 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 lai. Ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch
Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Yai lai 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 yai lai yai lai 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 yai lai 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 yai lai lai yai lai 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 yai lai lai yai lai lai lai. You look at page 31. Words that awaken us to the changes in time. This period of our lives, this time of the pandemic, has had a strange effect of making time blur together. Makes it a little harder to distinguish between time. But we have these windows to help us notice the daylight fading away and the wonders of the evening beginning to appear. And for all that entails, we give thanks to God with these words. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, Hama'ariv Aravim. On page 34. 34. I am here, I am now, asking when, asking how. Only I, only thou, only one.
Fill my heart, still my soul. I am part of this whole. I will sing out my soul to the one.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Adonai ומלכותו לעולם, לעולם ועד. שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני, אדוני אחד.
Please join me on page 36 for the Ve'ahavta. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol meodecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם אלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. By show of hands, I'm curious how many of you were able to participate as at somebody's home, possibly your own or somebody else's home where you were a guest on Monday night in our Simchat Torah Comes to You extravaganza. Show of hands. Yeah. Well, look, I see a lot of folks who were there. Some of you were not able to participate in that. I'm going to give you the vicarious opportunity to be a part of that for just a moment. Some of you, a lot of you who raised your hands, of course, it wasn't me who got to be with you at your home because we had our whole team. Cantor Cates was running around out there with Torah. Rabbi Ross was running around with the Torah. Rabbi Bernie was running around town with the Torah. Our rabbinic intern, Scott Goldberg, he was running around town with the Torah. Our other rabbinic intern, Michael Lewis, he was running around town with the Torah. All God's children. There were Torahs for everybody. It's a good thing our synagogue has a lot of Torahs, you know. I was going to say that.
Yes. So some of you, though, I actually had the opportunity to enter your home and to bring the Torah to you. And what I was studying with, everybody chose different things. All of us in the clergy chose different parts of the Torah to show to you and to feature and to teach you about. I chose to park the Torah scroll that I brought the big Sephardic scroll, that beautiful one in that ornate blue box. That was the one I schlepped around town, and it was a schlepping that one around town, but very, very much worth it to show that scroll off in all of its beauty to members of our community. And I had it parked on what is known as Shirat Hayam, the Song of the Sea, the section of the Torah that is right immediately following that extraordinary miracle of the parting of the Sea of Reeds, and everybody walks across to freedom, and now they're on the other side, and the water has been closed, and the Egyptian army can no longer threaten them, and they're just profoundly struck with wonderment at what they've just escaped. And now they know for the very first time, in point of fact, we're actually going to be free. I don't know if they actually felt free. It probably would take a little while to kind of run that feeling in. But the one thing that they knew was they were no longer slaves to those guys. That was over. And so the teaching of the Torah is that their hearts spontaneously sprung forth in song. And there's this beautiful poem that ultimately is set to music. We don't know what the music that they sang was, but there are lots of folks who have set this melody, this text to melody over the years.
But it so happens that right there, embedded in the center of that section of our scroll, is this next prayer that we're about to sing together. It's one of only a couple prayers in the prayer book that actually comes from the Torah. Most of our prayers were invented at the time that prayer became much more central in our tradition, right? We know that in antiquity, so many of the stories that we read about in the Promised Land were of the great temple that stood in Jerusalem, and the Israelites would make their pilgrimages during major festivals like the one that just ended on Sukkot. They would travel by foot into Jerusalem, and they would go up to the Temple Mount, and they would bring their animals for animal sacrifice. That was the means that they used for communicating with God. It wasn't prayer yet, or at least not in a very significant or sophisticated way. It was not yet prayer. Once that temple was destroyed, and the Israelites were dispersed into all these different lands, ultimately landing folks like you and me here in this land, far away from where that ancient temple once stood. Prayer became the only mechanism. We didn't have a place to bring the animals to. And so this is really what gave rise to the advent of rabbis. Rabbis to lead communities and teach Torah, all of that actually came about only a couple of thousand years ago, after the destruction of the temple by the Romans in the year 70 of the Common Era. And so prayer starts to take shape. And so, of course, the rabbis start trying to give voice to all those things that we would want to include in our prayer service. And we've already sung many of them, but there are two spots in the service where we actually pray words that come straight out of the Sefer Torah. One of them just ended, and the other is about to begin. Kendra Cates is already nodding because she's like, I know where he's going with this. Yeah, you want to tell him about the first part that we just sang?
The Shema
Yes.
and the Ve'ahavta come right from the Torah. And I always tell my B'nai Mitzvah kids that that's the melody of Torah, is because it comes from the Torah.
Exactly. The melody that we sing for Ve'afta is not some, composition for it. It's the Torah trope. It would be exactly as it would sound if you were chanting it right out of the scroll, as our bar and bat mitzvah students do on Saturday mornings, or our adults do at Shabbat morning minyan or other services. And so Shema and Ve'afta are really one of the same. They're in the book of Deuteronomy. I thought about actually parking the Torah on the Shema and the Ve'afta, but I changed my mind, and I ended up going with what comes next, and that is Shirat Hayam, where Mi Chamocha is found. And we talked a little bit about how that section of the scroll looks different than any other part of the scroll. It's only the section known as Shirat Hayam that's laid out in this weird sort of almost like a brick wall kind of way. The words, there are equally sized void spaces in between all of these size spaces, same size spaces of words. And so you look at a full column, and it looks, well, the rabbis have taught it looks like a lot of different things. One of the things they taught is that it could in fact look like a brick wall, like what the Israelites were forced to build when they were slaves in Egypt. And so it was supposed to be an echo of that. Others suggest that it's more of a premonition of what was to come, because it looks a little bit like the way that the the text is laid out. It looks like there's really kind of three sections, and it almost looks like the first one waves into the second, and the third waves out of the second. It looks a little bit like the waves of the water of the sea. And there are definitely those who talk about the idea that it also, if there are three sections, one could be one side of the scroll, the other side of the scroll, and the text in the middle. And so some suggest it is supposed to get us thinking about that Torah that is going to be received by the Israelites just a few chapters later in the scroll, when they stand at Sinai, receive the 10 Commandments, and Torah becomes the guide to their freedom. We know that Mi Chamocha and this section of our service is supposed to remind us that freedom isn't just some giant, wide open, unbounded experience. It's not just about liberation. We're struggling a lot with that in our country right now. How you know you're free is when you are in relationship with a people, and together you have decided to chart a course that enables a society to live safely and freely. And so the freedom that you find in the Torah, we all know it's filled with mitzvot, right? There are 613 of them. The whole idea is that freedom is not so much about just being completely liberated to do anything that I wanted, no matter how it might affect another person. In point of fact, how you know you're free is when you're living in harmony with law. And when you live in harmony with law, you have responsibility. The great gift that comes with our kind of freedom, the freedom that the Torah provides, is the responsibility to be among those creating justice by living Torah. We're going to sing about that wonder as we join together on page 40.
Yada lai 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 yada lai lai lai. Yada lai 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 yada lai lai lai. Yada lai 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 yada lai lai lai. Yada lai 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 lai. Mi kamocha v'elim Adonai. Mi kamocha neder b'kodesh norat tefilot. Osef pelech, Osef pelech. Malchutcha ra'uvanecha, bokeyam lifnei Moshe. Malchutcha ra'uvanecha, bokeyam lifnei Moshe. Zeli Hanu ve'ameru Adonai yimlo leolam leolam va'ed. Yala lai 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 yala lai lai lai. Yala lai 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 yala lai lai lai. Yala lai 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 yala lai lai lai. Yala lai lai lai.
Peek behind you. You can see in the windows, starting to get dark out there. Perfect time for us to turn to the supplemental page, or if you want to just follow in the Hebrew on page 42. The words of prayer, Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu L'Shalom, cause us to lie down in peace as this night descends. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu L'Shalom, L'Shalom, V'hamidenu Malkeinu L'chaim. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Amen. Shelter us beneath thy wings, O Adonai. Guard us from all harmful things, O Adonai. Keep us safe throughout the night, till we wake with morning's light. Teach us, God, wrong from right. Amen. 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 Let me hear you. Our Amidah begins on page 46. If you're able, I invite you to stand. Yalla lai 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 la 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 ya la ya la la ya la ya la ya la ya la ya la 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 ya la ya la la ya la ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la ya la la ya la ya la la ya la ya la ya la ya la la Adonai. Ya la 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 ya la la Sfatai tifta. Ya la 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 ufi yagim. Ufi yagim tehilatecha.
Baruch atah Adonai
Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu ve'imotenu,
Elohei Abraham,
Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah,
Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor ve'hanora,
El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, Vekoneh Hakom, Vezocher Hasdei Avot ve'imahot, Umevi Geula livnei bneihem, Leman Shemo be'ava, Melech Ozer u'Moshiach u'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Vezrat Sarah. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי הכל אתה, רב להושיע. משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים. ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הכל. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום, יהללוך סלע. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. Our Amidah continues in silence through page 62. Those words are available for you to consider. It's also a perfectly good time to just turn to the words of our own hearts. Feel free to remain standing or to be seated whenever you're ready. page 62. Ose shalom, shalom bimroma, uyase shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Israel, ve'imru amen. Uyase shalom aleinu ve'al kol Israel. Amen. Ose shalom, shalom bimromav. Uyase shalom aleinu ve'al kol Israel, ve'imru amen. Uyase shalom aleinu ve'al kol Israel. Amen. Ose shalom, shalom bimromav. Uyase shalom aleinu ve'al kol Israel, ve'imru amen. Ve'al kol Israel. Amen. So I already gave you a lot of Torah. That's very good. Yeah, this calls to mind. Those of you who are longtime members of our congregation know that our founding rabbi, Rabbi Leonard Bierman, his longtime wife, she died, unfortunately, sadly, very shortly after he retired, Martha Bierman. Some of you longtimers remember Martha very well. And she would oftentimes do what my wife Allison is doing right now. She would hold up her watch while Rabbi Bierman was speaking to the congregation and just sort of gently wave it at him as a way of conveying that special message that only a wife can say to the rabbi, though many would wish to say it to the rabbi. So I'm going to keep it brief. Martha, that's my plan. Aleha hashalom, may her memory be a blessing. Yes, I had the chance to talk to you about Shirat Hayam and about the Torah that I spoke about as I carried my scroll around town on Monday night, but didn't get a chance yet to say anything about this week's Torah portion, which I want to do because this week's Torah portion is the first. We just rolled back to the very beginning of the scroll. If you choose to tune in to J.J. Mandel's bat mitzvah tomorrow morning, she led us in Kiddush at our table blessings just a little while ago. She'll be the one reading from this week's Torah portion. Very first time, brand new cycle. All of the scroll is over on one side, and we're literally in the very first column at the beginning of the scroll, which means we're back at the story of creation. And I talked a little bit about that in the message that I sent out to our congregation at noontime today. But I want to point out the way in which the message that I shared with all of you in the email this afternoon was all about the very beginning of creation. How right there in the very first day, Yehi Or, let there be light. And we know that the light that they're talking about, that they experienced, was not the light of the planets, because they get created on a different day. So we're just talking about light writ large. Light in the grandest metaphorical sense, and even that which transcends metaphor. That which is real in a way that it's not necessarily like a bulb that you screw in, or that a switch that you turn on, or even a planet that rises or sets based on the rotating of the seasons, or the day and the night. And so, yes, that's the light that initiated creation. But I want to talk for a moment about what ended the story of that first week of creation. We all know that the sixth day of creation, the final day that God was working, because the seventh day, of course, was Shabbat, day of rest, first day of rest. God gave God's self a day off after 6 days of tremendous effectiveness, creating everything. The sixth day, what gets created? Anybody remember? Very good. Shani, Raphael, Sarah. Yeah, she's giving us a peace sign over there. Shani lives with my family right now. She's an Israeli exchange student. She was host to my daughter Eliana back in April through June. And now Shani is living with us. And lo and behold, she went like this. When I asked what was it that was created on that sixth day, she went like this. And that is all of us. The creation of humanity. Human beings created on the sixth day. And what's interesting is that throughout the 6 days of creation, God keeps saying again and again, again and again, Vayar Elohim Kitov. Vayar Elohim Kitov, again and again and again. And that means every single time God comes up with some great new invention, whether it's the sun, the moon, and the stars, it's the seas, separating the seas from the sky, or whether it's the animals or the plants, or you name it, whatever it may be, God keeps saying, Vayar Elohim Kitov. God saw, that's pretty good. God saw it was good. Gets said again and again, repeatedly throughout day after day of creation. You get that sixth day of creation, and humans are created, and suddenly the phrase changes, notably. The phrase changes to, what's that? Anybody, you think you know? Very good. Yes. The phrase, Hine Tov ma'od, suddenly God says. Vayar Elohim et kol asher asa, v'hine tov ma'od. So God is now looking at all of the stuff, everything, but waiting until humanity has been created to say, Hine tov ma'od. This is very good. That's when God knows it's Miller time, time for a day off. That's when Shabbat gets created. And so, think about that for a moment. Very, very powerful, important message to all of us who are a little down on humankind these days. If you've been looking at the creation that is the human being and noting all of its imperfections, all of our imperfections, the ways in which we struggle to be and be with each other. And if you're starting to feel a little downtrodden about it, remember, this story begins with the creation of light, writ large light, and a large announcement straight out of the Torah every time we start its story again, that light is the default position. Light is from which we come. Light is what is foundational, not the darkness. And we know, of course, every day and every night, the light comes, it goes. Sometimes light does give way to darkness. The darkness never stays. The darkness never stays. Once again, there is light, because light is the default position. That's the front end of the week of creation. The back end of the week of creation is the creation of you and me. That's what makes creation in sum tov ma'od, more than just good, very good. Append the whole story, and suddenly we can really see that we are supposed to be progenitors of that light. It doesn't say what that light is. We know it's not light of that sort. So, what is that light? All I know is, Hine Tov Ma'od, once we come along, there's this possibility of the very good. And it was all predicated upon returning from darkness into light. If you're thinking to yourself in a cynical moment, gosh, this moment seems like it's so full of darkness. maybe it's when the darkness stays. A lot of people have wondered about that before. We're hardly the first to enter into a moment that feels darker than we think we can stand, than we can tolerate. The Torah has been around a long, long, long time. The people who were its architects, they certainly knew a thing or two about staring into the darkness and wondering if the light would come back. And God knows our Sifrei Torah and our Ark, including that Holocaust scroll that was rescued after being stolen by the Nazis and was supposed to go into some museum after we were all gone, to attest to the fact that the Jews are gone, the Jews are dead, and here's their relic. The Torah has seen even darker than whatever darkness may be in front of your eyes or filling up your soul. And still it testifies every single year when we roll it back to its beginning. The default position is light, and the very good becomes possible when we enter the equation. There's a responsibility that comes with freedom. There's a responsibility that comes with being inheritors of the Sefer Torah, being inheritors of this story, reading and encountering it again every single year, not just in the ones that seem to be flooded with light, but the ones that also have a little too much darkness. Yehi or, let there be light. Let there be light. For those in our circles of love and friendship who are desperately in need of light because they know illness, they know brokenness, they know despair, we're going to join together in a prayer for healing and strength to help strengthen them, to bring them some measure of what we are collecting by being here with each other. We need to bring to them. Some of it we need to bring to ourselves as well. And so if you would like to speak aloud the name of someone in your personal circle who you'd like to include in our prayer for healing on this Shabbat evening, I invite you to stand at this time, and when my eyes meet yours, you can speak those names aloud to our congregation. For those of you who are praying with us from home, I invite you also to take this moment to speak aloud those names that will be joined with all of ours so that we can call them to mind and to heart for strength and healing. The words of our healing prayer, Mishaberach, can be found in the middle of page 253. Mishaberach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength who blessed the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Mishebeira imotenu mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen. Aleinu can be found at the bottom of page 282. If you're able, I invite you to stand.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר ואדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד, ושמו אחד, ושמו אחד.
Some special words to help us prepare for the recitation of Kaddish this evening, words not found in the prayer book. It's a poem that I'll read at different times in preparing for Kaddish all during the year, but in particular at this season of the year. I've just finished the Fall Harvest Festival. Some of you noticed that when we were making the Amidah, we were praying the Givrot prayer. We had made the switch from the summer language of Morida Tal, letting the dew come forth from the earth, changing it to praying for the rain, for there to be a restoration of all that's fading away during these winter months. And so a perfect time for these words by the great poet Lee Young Lee, entitled Blossoms. From blossoms comes this brown paper bag of peaches we bought from the boy at the bend in the road where we turned toward signs painted peaches. From laden boughs, from hands, from sweet fellowship in the bins, comes nectar at the roadside, succulent peaches we devour, dusty skin and all. Comes the familiar dust of summer, dust we eat. Oh, to take what we love inside, to carry within us an orchard, to eat not only the skin, but the shade, not only the sugar, but the days. To hold the fruit in our hands, adore it, and then bite into the round jubilance of peach. There are days we live as though death were nowhere, in the background. From joy to joy to joy, from wing to wing, from blossom to blossom, to impossible blossom, to sweet impossible blossom. As we prepare to recite the Kaddish prayer this evening, we remember especially Fifi Bronstein, Lawrence Cohen, Gordon Davidson, Irving Feig, Norma Feshbach, Lottie Fine, Irving Fuller, Theodore Gerson, Hattie Goldman, Aaron Gottlieb, Leon Greenberg, Leon H. Guide, Dirk Henkel, Marie Himovitz, Alvin Hittner, Rose Isaacs, J. Howard Karp, Reuben Klamer, Sheldon Levin, Gertrude B. Miller, Jack Nissenbaum, Jane Ortner, Rochelle Rappaport, Norma S. Reif, David Solomon Ribbett, Leon G. Sklar, Arnie Sperling, Lloyd Stockel, Howard Tiger, Naftali A. Weidberg, Martin Widzer, Lillian Wolf, Shirley Zimring. Are there other names we should include? If so, please speak them aloud either here in the sanctuary or at home. We think as well of all those who we name in our hearts and those who have perished in the millions from COVID-19 all over the world. And of course, those who have lost their lives as innocent victims of violence. We sing and pray of peace. We must take those prayers out into the street and become Osei Shalom, makers of peace. Holding them all close at heart, we say Zecher Tzadik Livracha, the memory of the righteous is an everlasting blessing. As together we give thanks for the blessing of life with the words of Mourner's Kaddish, found on page 294. If you're able, please rise. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, ve'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chaye chon u'v'yom echon, u'v'chaye dechol beit Yisrael, v'agala u'v'isman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'lalmei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal, shemei dekudsha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiram be'alma v'imru, amen. Yehesh lama Rabbah min shemaya, v'chaim, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Osei shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'imru, amen. May the giver of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved among us, and let us together say, Amen. Osei shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael ve'himeru, amen. Osei shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael ve'himeru, amen. Before we wish each other Shabbat Shalom, some of you are already doing it, it's too late, it's all good. Before we wish each other a Shabbat Shalom, I just want to wish a special Shabbat Shalom to Cantor Linda Cates. It was a big week for her. Big week for her. It's a week she's been a little anxious about, I can tell you. She's been feeling it, wondering how that was going to go, and let her say it. How you feeling, Cantor Cates?
It's kind of been an emotional roller coaster yesterday of love and sadness.
Yeah, understandable. I think we're feeling all of it, but grateful to this community for helping to wrap its arms around someone who has wrapped her arms around us again and again and again. For 12 plus years, it will be a full 13 before we're bidding farewell. We're real clear. It's only 12 years and 3 months at the moment. So we've been talking about 13 years and all that stuff. No, not yet. Yeah, so 9 months she remains with us, and we're looking forward to making a lot of music and prayer and good spirit with one another until the end of June. And so special Shabbat Shalom to her as finally this news belongs to all of us. And let us make the most of this special 9 months that we have left together, exactly as we are, to enjoy that time, to make Shabbat and celebrations with one another, and to really relish in the gift of our celebrating relationship. That's the name of the game here at our congregation. And so to you, Shabbat Shalom, to all of you, Shabbat Shalom as well. And thank you for coming and joining us here inside this sanctuary, first time in a long time.
Shabbat
Shabbat Shalom.